Welcome to the Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. This is a weekly podcast which looks at every aspect of something which has or will at some point affect us all. And that is grief. Whether you've lost a loved one or about to lose someone you know, or perhaps you're simply trying to help someone navigate their grief and don't know where to start or what to say, then perhaps this is the podcast for you. Each week I'll be bringing you different stories and experiences of loss, love, hope and at times humour. Now when a loved one passes away, aside from obviously having to deal with what has just happened and the huge I suppose knowledge and impact that somebody you love has gone, one of the first things you have to do is arrange how you're going to say goodbye. And what makes that even more difficult is if it's sudden or perhaps that conversation was never had. And then it goes on to how do you honour that person in a way that they should be honoured or that perhaps they would have liked to be honoured and remembered. And in a word, celebrated. Conor Clear is a celebrant and he joins me now.
Thank you so much for having me. It's actually very special to be here on the podcast because actually as I started my journey as a funeral celebrant, I've been a wedding celebrant for a few years.
Yes.
But as I stepped into funeral celebrancy, the first series of Grief Encounters came out. And so it was just very special as I was finding my feet to just hear and listen to conversations about this.
And how it affects people differently.
Absolutely.
And the different experiences they have. I think, first of all, the one thing that stands out to me most is the word celebrant. And I think that is what is so important, even though it mightn't, the word celebrate, a celebrant, even though it might seem the wrong word at such a really difficult and hard time for so many people.
Indeed. Yeah. And very often it's not a celebration because you're meeting people at really traumatic, really difficult times. Like you said, you know, sometimes it's sudden, sometimes it's a young death as well. Sometimes there's a sense of, you know, the person hasn't left at a natural time, you know. And very often, equally though, they are people who have lived wonderful and long and fulfilling lives, and you come into people's lives and you sit in their house and you have a cup of tea with them and they do say we want to celebrate their life. Now look, the idea of a celebrant, you know, I've never really thought about the derivative of the word. It's been a name that's been applied to us over the years. Actually, I don't draw that link, funnily enough, between celebrate and celebrant. I'm very passionate about the idea that, you know, we need to celebrate our lives, but celebrate them now while we're living. That's part of actually what I've learned through my journey in funeral celebrancy as well. So the link between celebrant and celebrate is a little bit intangible. I see where they cross over, but it's not a mutually exclusive crossover, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So a celebrant, I mean, you know, there's a lot of people who just for now and in the times we live in, a traditional church service isn't right for them, or it doesn't reflect the people that they were or the people that are left behind are. So what sort of people would go to a celebrant? Like, because you hear of, is it the same as a humanist ceremony? Is it the same thing or is it something different?
Okay, so I speak with great respect about humanism. We're very lucky to have a wonderful humanist society in Ireland. And I know some of the celebrants personally, and they are wonderful, wonderful celebrants. Humanism is its own thing.
Okay, so that's a different...
It's as far as I perceive it, it's got its own belief system. It's got its own faith. But the Humanist Society were one of the first organisations to arrive into Ireland that could offer something that wasn't traditionally religious.
Yeah.
And so now, and I would still get phone calls from funeral directors saying, Conor, we have a humanist ceremony. And I go, well, yeah, okay. I'm not a member of any organisation. I can reflect any beliefs. So I say yes to that. I turn up and I meet the family. And actually what transpires is they don't want a specifically humanist celebration.
They just want
service. They just want something
non-denominational
or non-religious. So we do use that word humanism for anything that doesn't happen in the church, which my perception of it isn't entirely correct and entirely accurate. So I would describe myself as an independent celebrant.
Okay.
Because I'm not aligned to any belief system or any organisation in that regard. I'm a member of the Association of Funeral Celebrants Ireland, but we're just a directory, a community, let's say, of celebrants. But I would describe myself as an independent celebrant in that regard. What type of people?
Because I sort of feel like in when I think of a celebrant, whatever, it's sort of maybe generational. It's a new generation of how we traditionally you'd say send somebody off, I guess, or say goodbye to somebody. But it seems to be a more accessible, approachable, friendly way. Would that be right?
But you know what's interesting, you saying that, there would have been a time where I would have absolutely shared that notion. And like that before I moved into funeral celebrancy, when I was a wedding celebrant, and only pretty much doing weddings, and in inverted commas, I'm doing the air quotes, happy occasions. And people would often say, oh, now are you going to become a funeral celebrant? And I was always really intimidated by the fact that if somebody contacted me to do a funeral service, because I'm 40, whatever age I am, I'm still young, okay, with youngish. But I thought the type of people who would be ringing me would be for services that were young or sudden or tragic. And that kind of intimidated me an awful lot, because I thought, geez, I can't go into people's homes and I can't do this.
Well, I would imagine there's a massive pressure as well to deliver the right, exactly.
Well, exactly, yeah. But what happened was just a natural journey that brought me into it anyway. But once I was there, then I realised, actually, the people who I spend time with are from so many different generations and ages, and it's very often, very regular, that I would be with a family to do a funeral service for somebody who we would, we'd all generally agree would be considered older, or a person of a certain age, which in the early days surprised me, because I had this preconception that it would be younger generation, but it is everyone. Everyone. So all different ages, all different generations. I'm getting to travel all across Dublin. I pretty much would stay in Dublin, but you get to see all different, let's say, classes as well, and all. It's very interesting. I love it.
Where does the journey for a celebrant start with the person? I mean, obviously, some deaths are very sudden, and there's no. I mean, that's. But for a lot of people, they might be ill for a long time, and this might be a sort of process where, the end is inevitable. Where do you come in that process? Because it seems always, any celebrant, where there's been a celebrant that I've been to, they know so much about the person, but in a genuine way that they've met them. Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, I only really come into people's lives when the person has passed.
Yeah.
Because it's the funeral home will ring me, and then I contact the family, and then it goes from there. And then you sit with the family and you have a cup of tea, and you as I always say, I'm going in between conversations with families insofar as I'm trying to glean logistical information about what music you'd like, or what, but also then trying to weave in a sense of that person as well. So it's always, you know, as I say, despite the sadness that brings me into people's lives, it's actually quite a lovely experience to hear people talking with so much love about their loved
and telling
one.
their stories
and stories and memories and how they made them feel, and it's really lovely. So that's really the predominant scenario that I would find myself in. The person has passed. It is not uncommon that I've gotten a phone call from people to say, I'm planning my own funeral and I'd like you to be the celebrant.
I was going to ask you about that, because I think that is a huge thing. And I was listening actually to a chat you had on your own podcast, the Celebration Sessions.
Oh, thank you,
with Jennifer McConnell. And you were talking all about like legacy and, you know, the fact that more and more people are starting to think about what they want, what music they want, how they want their end to be, and how they want themselves to be celebrated.
And I think it's a wonderful conversation. And like that, before I was a celebrant, I never thought about it. But now I'm here and I'm doing it. And I've become really passionate now about having the conversations. They're difficult conversations, you know.
They are.
To have with your family. But what I will say is, as soon as you give a thought, and you don't have to be obsessed with it, just a little bit of thought, and it can be something as simple as communicating something really simple as a piece of music, or here's a little poem that I'd like read. Something as simple as that can give your family so much peace in that moment. Because, look, hopefully as a celebrant I make the process as easy as we can, and hopefully I'm very gentle, and I know other celebrants who will go in and meet families, we'll make the process as gentle as we can. But and the funeral directors as well will take as much as they can off a family to make this process as easy as we can. But the pressure is still on a family innately to give their loved one the send off that they think that they think they want in the space of 3 or 4 days.
Which is, but they're also doing it with going through this massive trauma.
Exactly.
Sometimes you don't, like, maybe I know my dad, he was sort of ill for years, but then at the end it was all sort of quite quick. But he would never, like, anytime he brought it, I'd just throw me in a box. Do you know what I mean? The only one thing he did was the song Jerusalem, which everyone then thought was going to be the Jerusalema, but
that's exactly where my head just went.
Everyone said went to the Jerusalem.
Yeah, of course,
but
I know.
So it's sort of then we were sort of going, oh God, well, what else would he like? Which actually was ridiculous because there was so much time, but he wouldn't. He was just like, nah, not interested.
Look, they're difficult conversations for people to have, but you see the comfort that when I do meet a family and they'll say, oh look, they've given us this poem, or they said they want this piece of music, or you know, this is, and it takes, I'll tell you what it takes from a family. It takes doubt away from what they're planning. It takes the question mark out of the equation as well, and it just gives them a sense of confidence that the family can go in and arrange this with the celebrant and with the funeral director. And look, in I presume it must be the same with the priest as well, you know. It just takes the doubt out of it, and it makes the process for the family just that, even if it's just a fraction easier.
Because it can also cause, I mean, everybody's on edge, everybody's tired, everybody's, you know, grieving, but it also can be a time of conflict as well, because
of course it can, and because emotions are
running high,
they're magnified, and so the slightest things, of course, can just be a, what's the phrase? Not a touchstone. No, that's the wrong word.
But you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's a fuse, you know. Sometimes. So that's why I just see the power that can come from having that conversation. It can be as small, as I said, it can be a piece of music, it can be a piece of poetry, it can be something right up to the other end of the scale where you say, this is where I want to this is where I want to be cremated, this is who I want to do, you know. It can be as detailed as you want. I've thought about now what I want now, and if we had have had this conversation 5 or 6 years ago, or well, God, I'm at this 5 years now, so before that, you know what I mean? if we had this conversation 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh no, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
thinking
it's
about
far
that.
too- yeah.
But now I'm in it,
But
and
I
I've
think-
thought all about what I want.
Absolutely. I mean, it was always, my friend and I used to always have this joke that, you know, if something ever happened to us, like run down by 46A or whatever, make sure if it goes into the papers, it's a nice photo. Do you know what I mean? To the
My
point where
word,
I don't
yeah.
want that photo, you know that one.
Oh,
Do you
that's
know
a
what I
good
mean?
point. That's one thing I haven't
Yeah.
thought of, a photograph. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for that.
Think about that
yeah.
now. Is it not also though the service and the funeral, while it is everyone's there for, I suppose, the last time in one way that most people will come together for a person, is it not also for the family and those left behind?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I often do think that obviously there are two most important people at a funeral service, and that is the deceased, and it has to be about them, and they're at the centre of it. But funerals are for the living, and they are this little moment. They're not little, but they are a moment of catharsis and release, and hopefully comfort. And I hope the idea of being able to put together something that's meaningful and sincere, and something that will be appropriate for the deceased, gives the family some comfort. And what I often think is that the hope is that what we consider to be a good funeral, you know, and a positive funeral experience, is the start of what we hope, at least, is the start of a healthy journey of grief.
Yeah, and
for the family.
the process of no, absolutely, because it is that sort of, you know, it's their last birthday party, it's their last Christmas, it's their last everything all joined into one.
I know.
So you do want, you know, to go away with some little bit of, you know, you don't always, obviously, there's different situations, but it's one of the last memories.
True. And you know what? As we say, look, there's obviously, you know, the different emotions that can come up, because sometimes they are traumatic and they are difficult, and they're not celebrations of life. Very often they are celebrations of life. Whatever that innate emotion that the family innately needs to feel is the most important thing. So, for example, it mightn't be that they need to leave on some high note where we all smile and remember the good times. Sometimes a family will just need to cry and release and let that go, and they can walk away and just the shoulders go down, and you know, it's just that release. So it is about just identifying that and what is it that this family need in this situation, you know.
How do you think, I guess, from like now doing your celebrations, how do you feel that they are a more positive, aside from the fact that people get to play what music they want to play? I mean, I remember a family member, and the brother rang and said, you know, that they wanted to speak to somebody just about the music, and they were driving, and I was held the phone, and I was like, oh, well, their favourite song was, I can't remember, it was a Beatles song. And I was like, it's a church. You can't have that music. It's a funeral in a church. And that for me was because normally in, say, Church of Ireland services, you can have what you want within reason. Do you know? So I found that very strange, because this was that person's day. It was that person's celebration. So do you think this is going to be there's going to be more and more of a move towards this sort of end of life? Do you think people will start becoming more engaged in how they want their end to be?
So do I think this is going to become more popular? I don't need to say I think it's going to become more popular.
Yeah.
I can say as a statement of fact, it is becoming
more popular.
And I say that with all of the respect, an awful lot of respect for the church, the Catholic Church specifically, and their ability to make their own rules for what happens on their altars. I think it's their house, it's
Absolutely.
their rules, by all means. And look, this is a conversation that's actually been simmering now for quite some time now. And it's just the idea that the Catholic Church have different rules for different dioceses, and even different individual churches within that diocese, different churches within individual parishes, and families then don't know what they're going to expect when they arrive in to sit with their priest, if they sit with their priest to talk about things. And they could get a really cool priest who's going to say, yeah, no, that's okay, we can have the Beatles. But they could equally find themselves in front of a priest who says, not on my watch, that's not going to happen. And that's while I absolutely, explicitly and passionately respect the Church's desire to actually protect the sanctity of the altar, you know, that's really fair enough. While I respect that and acknowledge that and the desire to protect the liturgy and the Holy Mass as well, to turn around and say to a family, no, you can't have the Beatles, or you can't have a eulogy is part of the conversation that's been happening recently due to specific circumstances in certain dioceses in Ireland. That's really traumatic for a family.
Well, it adds to the pain they're going through.
And it's really damaging. And to go back to this idea of the good funeral, the positive funeral experience that can bring healing, unfortunately, that's the exact opposite. And it means that's the first step on a really unhealthy journey of grief then. And I'm heartbroken when I hear people say to me, oh, this happened to me and we weren't allowed to do this and we weren't allowed to do that. One of the nicest moments that might happen regularly at services that I do, and I've been told by other celebrants that it happens to them as well. I don't do what I do for validation. I'm sincerely driven. It's such a lovely thing to do, and it's a special experience. Each family you engage with has its own individual special moments, you know. But so it's not about a validation thing. However, a compliment that you might get very often is when somebody comes up to you afterwards and says, I'm actually a churchgoer and I'm very devout, and I always just presumed I would go to a church. Having seen that ceremony now, I think this is what I'd like for myself.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a really special moment when that happens, you know.
That's starting that conversation.
That's regular feedback, you know.
But it's starting the conversation about what we all should perhaps be doing, because like you open the paper every other day and it's all, you know, be financially ready for your funeral, like have money put aside, because, you know, everyone's got to turn around and pay for it.
I know.
If you don't.
I know.
So if you're going to do it financially, why wouldn't you? I mean, you're going to pay for your own party.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? You might as well have what you want.
But you're right. Prepare for it financially, but also prepare for it emotionally as well, you know, and have those conversations.
But that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Get what you want for your money, whatever.
Yeah.
Talk to me about legacies and people also preparing for the legacy that they want to leave behind.
Yeah, this was just something that kind of simmered in my brain a little bit, because I just realised when you meet families so often, they'll often talk about what their loved one left behind in an emotional sense, you know, whether that's they one thing which I probably think is the most common thing, it might have been an interest in something or a passion for something, or, you know, some type of hobby that plays a big part in their life. Just something emotional that families take from their loved one. And I always found that such a nice... It's such a lovely thing, you know? And that just started to simmer with me. But I did then start to look into that idea of, well, God, what's my legacy going to be? You know, what are my family going to say that I brought into their lives? And, you know, what did I leave? Not in a tangible, not in a material sense, but actually just in this, what's my legacy?
A human sense.
Exactly, yeah. So I just started to think about that. I'm not sure if I've landed on an answer per se, but it does make you think. I think it's just working in this landscape. It does make you think about your own life and your own path, and you know what you do and what you leave behind, and the impact you make, and that extends in so many ways as well, because the more grief you meet on a regular basis and the more loss, you go, oh my God, none of us are getting off this planet alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nor would you want to,
Yeah.
You don't want to be here forever.
But is it like you were talking with Jennifer about
That's right,
like doing, if you had, I think, 3 words
to
do your own obit, what would they be?
Oh my word.
And I was listening to it going, well, I know what my 3 words would be for myself, but they might be the same as somebody else's 3 words.
And that's what's so interesting about it as well.
And worrying.
And it makes it a lovely exercise. The idea of asking people in your life, whatever quantity or quality of people you might kind of approach, whether it's family, a close circle of friends, to give you 3 words that encapsulate you. It is such a profound exercise.
Well, it really it sort of is as well. I remember when I was doing writing Martin's eulogy, and I looking for words to describe, and so I had a look through comments, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the main one was grumpy that came back. It was the common one, but what was interesting was all the different words that were used to describe him. There was so many variables that you sort of went, well, that's how other people, each different person. And then you realise, well, not all people see you the same as the next person.
That's very true.
Which is weird.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because you might think you're loyal, and you're funny, or you're this. But then somebody else might come back and go, oh no.
Oh
no, annoying, blah, blah, blah.
I'm joking.
No, but do you know what I mean? So it offers that whole, opens up that that whole big thing about how what you leave behind is so different.
Oh, absolutely. To
different people.
Yeah, absolutely. But even to just consider that in itself, even for anyone listening to this, to just take yourself off for a walk and think about it, and think about the different relationships in your life, and how those people communicate to you what you mean to them is, I mean, really deep. That's a podcast in itself.
It is. The whole thing with your legacy as well, and I suppose you're the driver of your own destiny, and you're like, we read we're sort of shown, try to be sold self-help books all the time about, changing your life, and then when it's new year, it's new you, and you're looking at same me. But this whole thing about looking after yourself and self-preservation, and I suppose tuning in with where you are, then comes down to the legacy you leave. When do we start doing that, or when should we start doing that? And how do you do that?
Well, I mean, look, it's like a pension. The earlier the better. But unfortunately, which is really understandable, it's just like the human condition. We tend not to think about that until a point in our lives where we say, if you're sitting in front of a doctor and you're told you've got X amount of time, that's usually when you start to confront these things. I consider myself to be blessed and very lucky that I'm the age that I am now, and I'm working at what I'm doing, and it has brought this into my life in a natural way, where I can start to just even consider that as well. And I often think, sometimes when I meat families and they'll talk about their legacy, like with specifically, because obviously I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and they talk about, he used to always do this, and he was a great uncle and all this kind of stuff, and I go, oh God, I'm a terrible uncle. I'm probably not, but you know what I mean?
But that's our memory of you.
Yeah. But it's just those little moments where those specific times you spend with a family and you go, oh, God, maybe I could do that with my family, or maybe I could do that with my friends, or, but sorry, just to go back to your question, when you should do it. Look, when you're comfortable and at your own pace, but it is something that I think is really constructive to give some space and time in your head too, and in your hearts as well, of course, as well. You don't have to be obsessed with it, but it's such a great thing to create some space in your life for it, because it comes with immense power. And I think once you start to consider that and give it time and space, there's a little trip switch in your head that you just start to live life in a very different way. Like, I wasn't that long being a funeral celebrant where I booked a trip to Antarctica. because I thought, this is on my bucket list. I'm doing this now because I could get a smack of the proverbial bus any day now. So I'm going and I'm doing it. And like that last year, touch wood now, I was very lucky to have gotten away a good bit to new places that I haven't seen before, new experiences. And, you know, so it is very powerful. It comes with great power when you do it, you know. It's like this little key that it just unlocks a door in your life, you know. Yeah,
it is something that I guess it is like a pension. You know,
the earlier the better.
I know. But the whole process, even the talking about, the engaging with somebody, the sort of going, this is what I want. This is my music. This is what I want. These are my 3 words.
Absolutely. Yeah, the 3 words. And actually, just while we talk about that came from Jennifer McConnell, and she'd be with livinglegacy.ie, and she's just fantastic. And she was the one that kind of cemented that idea of legacy. I'd been pondering it for a while, and I knew that this was Jennifer's area. So I contacted her, and we did an episode of the podcast, and we just delved into it a little bit. But it's a really interesting area, you know.
And has that changed how you do your services or how you do your celebrations, having done that yourself now?
Oh, that's a great question. Has it changed? I think what it might have changed a little bit? How I bring the energy into the room. I think that's, if it's changed anything, it's probably changed that. Some of my words and my thoughts and things that I articulate during funeral services absolutely, I think, would have changed, because they grow and change all the time as we individually grow and change as well, you know. But I think definitely, the energy and trying to reflect the energy that's in the room as well, and meet people on the same not the same emotional level, but the same emotional wavelength at least, you know. And that probably has shifted. But that comes from the idea of just thinking about my little
yourself, your
existential experience. Like, we're all just standing on a rock floating around the Milky Way. We're born, we live, we die, and we can have beliefs and thoughts about what happened afterwards. But we don't know. So this is it. This is it. This moment now is it.
So basically what you're saying is you plan your 40th and your 50th and your 60th. So start planning your last party. Conor, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I've loved being here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. You can listen on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have an online community on Facebook, The Grief Pod, or on Instagram @GriefPod Series.